Welcome to Product AMA, your daily online Ask Me Anything. We started Product AMA to give those passionate or curious about product management a daily break, something to look forward to. The format is 1 hour in length, weekdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. The first 30 minutes will always be a guest and a featured topic. The last 30 minutes is devoted to you, the audience, to ask your questions. So our topic today is about building community through recreational eSports digital platforms. And joining us today to discuss the topic is Byron Abrigg, who's the co-founder of Mission Control. So a little bit about Byron. Prior to founding Mission Control, Byron worked for Stadia Ventures, an accelerator based in St. Louis, where he worked closely with all facets of the program and the program's partners. So Byron, thank you for joining us today.
Mark, thanks so much for having me on. Really looking forward to the conversation.
So Byron, just for geography's sake, you're not from St. Louis and you're not in St. Louis.
All of the above are correct. Originally from Ohio, typically live in St. Louis, but have been quarantined down in Houston, Texas with my girlfriend for the past month and a half. So I'm covering all the geographies today.
All right, so you're social distancing, which is great.
Correct.
And just for the context, how did someone from Toronto, meet Byron? I met him through his company's participation in the Future of Sport Lab, which is an initiative here in Toronto by Ryerson University, actually the Ted Rogers School of Management, and Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. So maybe just to contextualize the conversation a little bit, Byron, can you talk about how you came to be part of an accelerator here in Toronto?
Most certainly. As Mark, as you mentioned when you were introducing myself, prior to founding Mission Control, I worked for 3 years for Stadia Ventures, which is an early stage sports tech and eSports VC fund with an accelerator program based out of St. Louis. While I was there, first started out as an intern when I was still an undergrad, and once I graduated, became the Accelerator Coordinator. So Stadia ran an accelerator twice a year, focused on early stage sports tech and esports startups. And during that time, I got to know both Sherry from Ryerson University as well as Sumet from MLSE. And when they announced that they were launching the Future of Sport Lab program 2 years ago, was incredibly excited and had a lot of Stadia's cohort companies that had actually participated in it. So when the time came for cohort number 2, we thought it was a phenomenal opportunity to take advantage of, to get to work closely with both of them and learn how our product could be used by a professional sports organization like MLSE.
Listen, we're happy that you got the chance to come up here with that accelerator, and by virtue of it being in Toronto, you basically have access to the center of the Canadian sports universe. So I'm sure it was an amazing, amazing experience. But we're not exactly here to talk about that today. We talked about accelerators on a previous Product AMA. But we're really here to talk about Mission Control. So before we get into some of the nuances of Mission Control, it is in the esports space. So out of all the companies that you would have seen through your various time at Stadia Ventures and before then, why did you and your partners choose esports as something to focus on?
It's a great question. And so for myself, and I have 2 co-founders, Austin and Brandon. Austin and I were college roommates. Brandon is his younger brother. For the 3 of us growing up in college, especially, video games was what we did to hang out with our friends. It was a very social experience for us. And the thing is we're not alone. There are over 100 million people in America who play multiplayer video games on average of 8 hours a week. So it's a ton of people that were just like myself and Austin and Brandon. We also, though, played rec league sports. We played college intramurals, soccer. We're now consistently still, especially when we get out of quarantine, Thursday night indoor beer league soccer. We're not very good. We lose most of our games, but we enjoy getting together with our friends once a week, doing an activity we love, and drinking some beer afterwards. So from our time at Stadia, we learned a ton about both the sports landscape and the booming esports landscape. And we saw that there were many parallels between the two, especially when you just look at kind of the tiers of competition. In both of them, you have professional leagues. You have the NBA, you have the 2K League. You also have amateur. You have, amateur minor leagues in traditional sports. You have tournament sites like World Gaming and Nerd Street Gamers in esports. And then you also have varsity teams, both at the college and high school level. What we saw missing in esports, though, that was so important to us in traditional sports was that recreational level of play. It's for all the people that aren't good enough to be pros, don't really care about winning money, or aren't in college or high school anymore. That's how the vast majority of athletes participate and spend their money. So when we looked at esports, and from our time at Stadia, we were looking for startups to invest in that catered to us, the casual, social, recreational gamer, not the competitive. We never found it. So we saw a huge opportunity and decided to quit our jobs and build it. And that's really where Mission Control came from.
Okay. Well, I absolutely understand what you're talking about. I've been quite active myself, although I don't look it anymore, but a weekend warrior I am for a long time. and having been in the sports business as well for quite a long time. And I'm also a parent of a couple children who are actively involved in sports. There's a plethora of platforms, and I won't name them all here, but there's a plethora of platforms that support the organization of sport. And what I'm trying to understand, and maybe this is the nuance of what you're doing with Mission Control, but I'm trying to understand where those platforms, and actually I will name a couple, Sports Engine and TeamSnap, because I know you'll be familiar with those from the US as well. We're familiar with them up here in Canada too. Sure. How come those platforms didn't jump on this, didn't adapt, and what is really that difference that a specialized esports platform like Mission Control can do, where those more open platforms that are more in traditional sports, amateur sports, haven't been able to catch up?
It's a phenomenal question. And I'll certainly start off by saying that, we look to all of those companies as, aspirations for the type of business that we want to build, and frankly have very good relationships with many individuals at both TeamSnap and Sports Engine, many of whom we've had conversations, and some are even advisors of ours at Mission Control as we started building this. When we first were kind of conceptualizing what this platform would become, we drew certainly inspiration from platforms like TeamSnap and IM Leagues, which is what we used when we were in college, but also from the fantasy football experience of creating a league on ESPN with your friends, as well as the group chats that we were always a part of when we were playing in those sports leagues. What really we found were some key differentiators between a platform that could cater to esport rec leagues as to traditional sport rec leagues. Some of those key differences were, one, in traditional sports, you're always going to be playing in person. You're going to the basketball court or the hockey rink to play. Whereas in esports, you oftentimes are playing online. So there was a different level of connectivity that needed to exist in order to cater to the online gamer versus the in-person athlete. Secondly, in video games and esports, you don't have to coordinate refs. There isn't necessarily that oversight that is required for a basketball league as there is for a 2K game online between you and your friend. And lastly, there's a lot less uniformity or mass understanding on the rules and standard operating procedures for esports or video games. For the most part, people understand how basketball works. People don't necessarily know the nuances of how League of Legends or Overwatch work. So we found that those were some things that the traditional platforms were really missing. So when we came to designing the platform, some of the things that we really focused on was the need to be social. We wanted to have group chats that were built into it so that you could be chatting with your opponents one-on-one before your game, talking smack, and then telling the rest of your buddies about the win that you just had or the great headshot you just got in your COD game. And that those organizations needed to be able to communicate with their gamers too. Secondly, we wanted organizations to be able to be hands-off. A lot of them don't necessarily know what video games are or how that works. So we needed software that could make it really easy for them to have default league settings, prompts and info within the app so that the gamers knew exactly what they needed to be doing each week. And then lastly, we wanted a lot of it to frankly be kind of automatic, that it could be something that an organization could set and it could just run. For instance, with video games, as Mark, you probably know yourself or your kids, you don't necessarily play during normal operating hours during the day. Maybe you get on at 11 p.m. Well, you typically wouldn't schedule a basketball game for 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, but if gamers want to play at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, more than happy to let them do it. So we needed to make sure that the software could allow users to reschedule and do things like that.
All right. Well, you've certainly thought through the features and the nuances unique to your area that there's no way I've seen any of that from the tools that I've been using. You did mention a few things there that before we kind of move forward and some other questions I wanted to address. So, when I'm thinking about the leagues that I participated in, and I have a little bit of purview into how it works for my kids. I mean, they play in an organized, like, local amateur league. There's coordination between officials and signed game sheets and one coach calling in the score. There's also, and this is a little more on the professional or sport federation world, but there's also the concept here in Canada, at least with the governing body for golf. They have an app. And so, Byron, if you and I are playing golf, and I want that score to be submitted for my official handicap so I can play in my club tournament. Now, I don't have a membership, but this is the example. There's that ability for you to validate my score so that it's used to calculate my handicap. So how do you address that, the distance and the lack of officials, so that the leagues have credibility in the scorekeeping and the winners and losers?
That's a great question, and was definitely one of the first things that was an issue that was brought to our attention when we first started working on this idea that we were going to need to address. And it was actually a conversation that we had, that Austin and I had with Wim Stocks of World Gaming, who told us about kind of the process that World Gaming goes about validating their platform and their games. And the vast majority of those are still kind of self-reported, user-reported. So for us, that kind of allowed us to, hey, at the beginning, we knew, we could focus on more self-validation and self-reporting than necessarily getting API integrations into games, which are things that we're certainly thinking about in the future. So when it came to actually designing the platform and how it's utilized today, is, say, Mark, you and I were playing in a game of FIFA, and you beat me 2-1 in a game. So how it works in the application is you would submit a score of 2-1. I would then get a push notification to my phone saying that you submitted that score of 2-1, and I should either confirm that result or contact support if there was a dispute there. What we found in the thousands of games that we've now had played and helped coordinate on the platform is that the likelihood that there is an issue has been 0 to none. Especially if you're playing head to head, it's rather easy to know if you beat me or not. Most oftentimes it's maybe you entered the score wrong. The next level of validation that we're working on, and we'll actually be incorporating this into one of our next product releases as we add Fortnite and the other Battle Royale games to the platform, is also submitting photos with each game. So knowing that I entered this score and here's the photo that shows that accordingly. One of the last things that I'll state on this is we were also thinking about the fact that this is a college intramural league, or this is a basketball league at your YMCA. Chances are the biggest thing that's on the line is a championship t-shirt. And not to say that that isn't super important, because I can tell you a lot of stories about gamers that as soon as they find out they're going to get an intramural championship t-shirt, if they win, they get really excited. But that need to have the highest level of validation and verification were things we knew we could push off into the future, as long as we focused on that kind of two-way confirmation.
All right. Well, it sounds like you certainly thought all of that through, and I haven't tried the platform yet myself. Maybe I'll start a mini league with my son, and we'll keep track. Maybe we'll include my wife and my daughters too, but we'll get there. We'll get there. As you've gotten there as a platform, maybe we'll go back in time a bit, and we'll look at that original beta or MVP, and what that was like, and maybe talk through how you collected data or insights to help you figure out what are the other features you wanted to build, or maybe what are the features that you had that were already live that perhaps needed a little iteration and tweaking in order to make the platform progress and to cater the needs of the users that you were bringing online?
That is also a great question, and I think we have somewhat of a unique approach that we took to get to where we are today. We had an early advisor, an investor, who, when we first started conceptualizing mission control, he gave us two Reid Hoffman quotes that we really took to heart. And first was, do things that don't scale. And secondly was, if you're not embarrassed by your first product release, then you waited too long. So when we first began working on Mission Control, now about 18 months ago, our very first version of the platform, what we called our alpha or our MVP, was a Squarespace website and Google Forms. It was entirely manual, but we had this idea of rec league esports, and we wanted to test it, and we didn't want to pour a lot of time and money into developing it until we truly knew what we needed to develop. So we went to a couple universities near us, got some friends, had a couple hundred people that tested out this alpha. And what we really understood after that experience was, we needed to make sure to build a platform that organizations could, manage and create leagues for their community. And secondly, we saw that users needed to have a mobile app that they could chat with their friends, and they could know who they're playing, keep track of their standings, and so on. So we started then building what we called our beta, and launched that back in September. So that platform at its core allows organizations to go on, create their organization, create and host leagues, invite their community to join those leagues, and then in turn allows users on the mobile app to find that organization, join leagues that they want to play in, whether that's FIFA or Rocket League or Call of Duty, chat with their league members each week, play their games, keep track of their standings, and so on. From that beta platform, though, over the last 8 months, we've tried our best to collect as much information from our players and our organizations as possible. We've done that through surveys, councils, just general support inquiries. And right now are working towards what we're calling our 2.0 product release that we're going to be rolling out this August, that really focuses on additional levels of complexity for organizations and what they want to be able to do with the platform, as well as providing our gamers, additional games for them to play, additional stats that they can track, easier ways for them to invite and connect with their friends, and so on.
All right. Well, I like the approach, and I love the quotes. And Reid built a great platform that I use a lot. If you could just go back and clarify for us when you're referencing the doesn't scale quote, how did that apply to that MVP? And when it came time to scale, how quickly did that don't scale aspect disappear?
That is a great question, and something that we are continually asking ourselves and revisiting. So what that initial platform, looked like was, individuals would submit a form and say, I want to join, FIFA. And then in Google Sheets, we would create a schedule, and then they would text us photos of each of their games, and then we'd update the scores in there, and so on. What the beta platform then, was able to do was that, hey, as soon as someone creates a league, and someone joins that league, once registration closes, the software schedules all of the games. There isn't any manual aspect of it for us. They're the ones that are entering the scores, and those scores and standings are getting updated accordingly. An organization getting on, while we might still have an onboarding call, they can create it themselves. They can create their organization, create their leagues. We don't have to be a part of that conversation. Whereas before, we had to talk to them through every step of the process. With all that being said, though, we recognize that there are a lot of aspects that we still want to be able to remove ourselves from. We want, our organizations we're finding want greater customization and want to be more hands-on than necessarily the platform our beta platform. So there are aspects that I look forward to in 3, 6, 9 months that myself and my success team don't have to be a part of, because we've built the platform in a way that we can be hands off and we can put the responsibility and the power in the gamers and the organizations themselves.
Well, it sounds like you absolutely fit the profile of an early stage company where the founder is also the head of product. I know you have some friends there, some close friends who are also your co-founders, which is an absolute fun thing to do. The product itself, just so the audience can get it right, it's not Google Sheets anymore. It's in the App Store, right?
No. Correct. Yes. So we launched the platform at the end of September. So it's a web-based platform for organizations to create their organization, and then create the leagues and host their digital community. And then it's a mobile app that's available in both the app stores that you create a profile, can join your local YMCA or college rec department. Sign up for some leagues and then play with your friends.
All right. Well, speaking about that acquisition part of your business, that was really the next question we had for you today is the product growth aspect. Talk to us about how an early stage company like yourself is managing that, and maybe look a little forward into what you hope to be doing in the near future.
As we kind of looked from a sales standpoint, how we wanted to grow our business, we kind of honed in on a couple of types of organizations that we wanted to sell to. And those were like college intramural departments or YMCAs or other rec centers that I've kind of referenced. So for us, as we were looking at ways that we could potentially accelerate our growth, we decided to start looking after kind of partnerships. If we could say work with a YMCA, well, maybe then we could work with a city's, all of their YMCAs, or a state or national. So as we have continued to bring more organizations onto the platform, they're interested in being able to bring their friends on, bring other departments in their organization on, bring other rec centers in their city or in their state on. So we are thinking about from an organization or administrator standpoint, we're thinking about how we can build layers into the platform to have governing bodies or governing organizations that oversee their other groups within it. If we were to start working with, we work right now with a couple Boys and Girls Clubs. If we were to work with Boys and Girls Club of America, how would we make sure that we've built the platform in a way that if we get Boys and Girls Club of America, they can have oversight and access to all of their other organizations that they're going to push us to, but that all those organizations can be connected in some way. So we're certainly thinking about that from how we're growing the organizations that are using the platform and paying us for that. From a user standpoint, we're thinking a lot about how we can improve and enhance the virality effect. Something that we saw just from our beta tests, that roughly about 20 to 30% of the individuals who were playing on the platform were invited by a friend. There's, if you join a basketball league or you join a fantasy football league, chances are you're going to tell your friend about it and then bring them along to join it. So we need to make sure that we're building the platform in a way that it's really easy for Mark to invite Rhythm, to invite Lee, so that all of them could come on. And then as a result of that, we've now got 3 users because we acquired 1, and then who are those friends going to bring onto the platform as well?
It sounds like there's a low barrier to entry to get started on the platform, different than I compare it to my weekly hockey skate, where I'm the guy who organizes it. No one is really too anxious to take that responsibility over. So I'm the one who's in these recreational organizational platforms. When you're looking at the user base, because it's so fluid, anyone could be your next league manager, I think is the way I look at it. How do you manage churn, or how do you encourage your users, and I'll call them your super users, your frequent users, to create that next league, create that next competition? Is that part of your marketing strategy?
Certainly something that we are constantly thinking about. So the way that we have it structured right now is that groups that can create leagues are certain organizations. Say it's your YMCA, your college rec department, or as a part of the FSL program, we worked with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment as a whole, who created an organization on the platform and then invited their employees for them to come on and compete against their, coworkers in NHL and NBA 2K and FIFA. So for those organizations to come back and play again, there are a couple of things that I think are really important. One is, making sure that there are new games that are being added to the platform that provide them, well, hey, now here's a new group that, could potentially be interested because now we have Fortnite, on the platform. Secondly, it's making it easier for them to invite their community to join the platform and then communicate with those individuals once they're on it. And the last piece is making sure that they see that once their students or employees or community members are on the platform, that they're having a great experience and that they're playing. For users, it's again, making sure that there are new games that are being added, that new features are being, added and made available to the platform, that new organizations are joining on that they're also a part of, and maybe they can win a little bit of money for a league instead. Most often than not, people just want to play. And as long as we're providing them more opportunities to do that, we've been very fortunate so far that they want to come back.
That's great to hear that you're not dealing with too much churn, and the success of your early data shows that. The revenue side, that you just touched on it for a bit. So how do you guys make money?
Great question. So we are, in short, a B2B SaaS platform. So we sell our software to organizations who pay us an annual fee based off of the number of users that they have that are participating in their leagues. So that is, how we're consistently, getting organizations, sign an annual contract with us. Typically there's a launch fee that's associated with it. And a lot of that goes towards making sure that they have a successful launch, that their first couple of leagues are really successful, that they're doing a great job marketing, and so on, to get users onto the platform. And then the second way right now that we make money is that we take a cut of every transaction that comes through the platform. So organizations can choose if they want to charge money for a league. Say they want to charge $10 for, a FIFA league, of which we're then taking a 10% cut of each of those transactions that come through. So we have the recurring revenue from organizations, and as long as they're successful and continue to get more users on the platform, what they are annually paying us will go up. And then in turn, the more users that we get on the platform, ideally they're charging money for those leagues. And then we're also being able to take a cut of those registration fees once they're on the platform and engaged.
All right. Well, that's a proven model that we've seen in the amateur sports space, and extending that model a bit, what it became for some of the larger properties, they also had an advertising play or a partnership play, because there's brands who, like your audience, you have data, you have some kind of understanding of the demographics and the frequency and who you're reaching. What kind of conversations have you had to date in that area of kind of partnership or advertising, and what do you hope to have, and how have you been planning the evolution of the platform to be able to support that monetization model?
Is definitely something that we have thought about from the beginning. I mentioned at the beginning of this about, that we love to be, we love our beer league softball or soccer league. Well, I think it would be awesome to have an official, beer league sponsor of beer league eSports. Certainly something that we'd love to, see down the line. One of the things from the beginning that kind of we made sure that, we wanted to make the statement that this is something that we're thinking about, was we had an early advisor of ours and good friend who was formerly the chief revenue officer at Complexity Gaming, who was responsible for bringing in partnerships with GameStop and the US Army and other groups like that. He actually came on at the beginning of this year to be our chief revenue officer. So as a result of that, we have someone that is very, well experienced, well versed, well connected in the sports and esports sponsorship space, that has, enabled us very early on to be able to start having conversations with groups about how they could utilize our platform for their marketing dollars. I think what organizations, are really intrigued by is understanding within a micro community, be that a college campus or a city, or maybe even a fan base, for instance, who in that group is maybe playing NHL, and that they could, market towards them because they know they're a hockey fan. Who's playing Fortnite but goes to this university or lives in this specific area that, hey, might be interested in, that local business, or something to that effect. We recognize that there's a large potential for the data that we're collecting to be very, of interest to the organizations that are on the platform and others. We're looking forward to, this fall as we bring on or roll out our 2.0 product, of really starting to explore and test some things like that to, to see how an advertiser or a sponsor could really utilize the platform. But it's definitely something that is at the top of mind.
I'm going to come back to this in a second. I wanted to first retain our focus around product management. We have a question, at least helping us with keeping us on point. So as you grow and you scale, when you look at your product management resources, maybe describe for us, what does that look like today? And then at what point did you bring someone on board to focus on product management, or when are you planning to do so?
So we from the very beginning, myself and my co-founder Austin, neither of us are coders by background or by trade. That isn't necessarily the experience that we brought into building this platform. We have both learned a heck of a lot in the last year and a half, and certainly feel far more versed in being able to articulate the type of product that we want, the features and the experience that we want along the way. But we've recognized from the beginning the importance of help. So we've been working for the last year with a development firm based out of Boston, who we've been working with very closely to build this product. And we've been incredibly proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish together. But we certainly know as we grow this business and take it to the next stage, the importance of beginning to bring some of that leadership and experience in-house. We're really excited that in the course of the next couple of weeks, we're going to be bringing on a full-time CTO who has a lot of very relevant experience in not only SaaS software, but league management as a whole. So we're really excited to have him be able to kind of take over those reins and really begin to evaluate how we are building out a team internally and externally to make sure that we scale it as the demand is there.
So outsourced. Okay, a lot of very successful companies have outsourced. So you're not alone there, and repatriating that technology is hopefully something that you look to do in the next, whatever it is, 12 to 18 months. Well, when we go back to this concept of revenue and where your business is going, I was thinking about a couple companies, or actually a few companies. So one was Sports Engine. I referenced them earlier. They were acquired a few years ago by NBC. There was also a collection of companies here in Canada, actually, who were acquired by, I think it was called Blue Star. Yep. And it was more a play, I believe, around payments. So when you look at both of those examples, getting transactions and getting transaction fees seems to be a very important part of this business. To similar to, quite frankly, what we've seen out of Shopify, and how they make a ton of money just on the transactions of all their customers. And when we think about, for a second, NBC, reaching the audience of kids, families playing sports, is something that maybe they wouldn't attract to, the NBC Sports digital platforms or Golf Channel, but now they have access to that data. When you think about your own business, and really what comes to mind are a couple brands, household brands like Walmart or Best Buy, which are very, very much selling tons of games. Maybe not Fortnite, because that's through the console, but they're selling tons of games. And is that someone who you've looked at or think about when it comes time to determine what is the long-term future of Mission Control? And also thinking about it for a second, I think Dick's Sporting Goods was into some of that as well. So it is right. Very common for big brands to try to reach new audiences through the amateur sport networks, similar to what you're doing. So why don't you tell us your thoughts all around that part of maybe your future, knowing that you're not there quite yet?
It is definitely something that we are thinking about, and has been in the middle of a lot of conversations that we've had, especially as we look at potential partnerships. I think certainly the big box retailers are something that that we've been thinking about for a long time. We have been working closely with GameStop over the course of the last 6 months, as they have begun reevaluating kind of what their in-person retail experience looks like, and looking to help provide a layer of programming on top of some of their more experiential based stores that they've been rolling out and testing in the United States. So big box retailer is definitely something that we're thinking about. Another one is fantasy sports companies, and the betting or gambling aspect of it. We know, especially if you're doing something with your friends, less so maybe on your college campus or your boys and girls club, but if you're starting a league with 9 of your buddies, you probably want to have a little bit of money on the line. You may also want to throw in some, additional bets this week because I really think I'm going to beat Mark, or really think you're going to lose to Lee. Those are things that we're thinking about, and would be, incredibly advantageous, and beneficial to, start building relationships with, gambling companies, or, the likes of a DraftKings or a FanDuel. And then I'd say the last group that we're certainly thinking a lot about are the other social networks. Facebook has obviously done a lot with gaming, and are continuing to, examine and roll out additional, features. That's definitely a third group that is very much of interest to us, and, the type of relationship that, we would really love to start building.
I'm actually getting pretty excited about your space now that we're talking about it. I don't spend a lot of time talking about the business. I more spend a lot of time with my son trash talking me when I play video games with him. That's generally my exposure. And also, there's one other brand which I think would be remiss if we didn't mention, which is Apple and Google, actually a couple brands who are pretty big into gaming, and thinking about integration, the way that we're integrated with Siri or Apple Pay. Is integration with either Google or Apple's native gaming platform something that you're thinking about for your property too, or your platform?
I would certainly say that it is. I think especially from the Google Stadia standpoint, the idea of really, it in its concept is, trying to democratize, access to gaming, that, anyone, as long as you have that, controller, and, you've got a subscription, or, whatever, that you can access and play, anywhere with your friends. That is definitely a type of integration that, we'd be incredibly intrigued by. Additionally, as we look to roll out more mobile-based gaming on the platform, integrations into things like, the Apple Arcade, or, just other Apple gaming experiences, is definitely something that is very intriguing, as well as the more traditional consoles like the Switch or the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One.
All right. Well, that rounds it out really, really nicely. Before we kind of move on to a couple questions more about the here and now, wanted to just have more fun with you today. Are there any specific experiments that you've been able to run, with your dev partner as part of your sprint planning, your roadmap, so that you were able to determine where further investment is required?
Got it. Great question. So I think there are a couple things. One of the first ones that comes to mind is we decided a couple of months ago to add to the platform a custom game type option. So essentially, kind of as you're going about creating a league, we have a drop down list of games that, are on the platform, and we basically built out kind of, preset rule, and game settings for, and had this, kind of request of the ability to, add a custom game that someone could create a league, in a game that wasn't maybe on there yet. And it's been really interesting as we've brought on, one of our first LAN centers, as well as some of our groups that are perhaps more experienced in gaming, to see kind of what they want to be able to do. what are the games that they're creating leagues in? How are they wanting them structured? Those are all now things that we are thinking about going forward, in how we schedule our games. The new games that we add to the platform, maybe the ways that the customization that organizations have. Those are all things because of, a feature that we kind of added in there. It's been interesting to see what they've done with it. I think to kind of build on that, one of the, interesting experiences is having some organizations that were really interested in using our platform for tabletop gaming, such as D&D. And not necessarily having a winner and a loser, but more having a single place that you can know every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. we're meeting up and we're playing D&D, and maybe we're keeping track of our stats, what our XP is after each week, but we've got a central place that we can, again, trash talk with our friends, but there's that scheduling aspect. That was something that we never necessarily thought of, or at least wouldn't have placed as a kind of short-term thing, but now it's something that we're really thinking about being able to incorporate sooner rather than later.
It's amazing to hear how the community has a life of its own. That's something that is very difficult for companies to necessarily react to and be agile. It sounds like you've been able to do that, and you're still in the early days of your business, only a couple of years into it. And when we're thinking about what's happening right now, with all of us at home, in my house anyway, I can tell you that the PS4 usage has gone up a lot. I mean, maybe it was an hour a day for my son, and then but now the usage is up to like 3 hours a day. It's still time for schoolwork and exercise and all those good things. But with Mission Control, what have you guys seen from your platform and a rise in activity? And then is there anything that you're specifically doing as a company to bring people together around esports so they can connect and compete?
The last few weeks have certainly been a very trying time for everyone in adjusting to this new work from home and school from home, and just world of social distancing. And when we first set out to build this platform, now coming up, on 2 years ago, we certainly were thinking about the idea of digital communities, but never thought of how important it might be when we experience a global pandemic. So, in the last month, we went from, about 3 inbound sales leads a week to now about an average of 10 to 15 a day. The last month has brought more colleges and park and rec departments, especially, as well as a handful of land centers and adult sport and social groups who, had basically lost the only way that they could connect with their community. For colleges no longer having students on campus, there was no student life experience that they could be providing them. For adult sport and, social groups that were, getting ready for softball seasons and soccer seasons to begin, those are no more. And that's revenue that's out the door. So we've been very, very fortunate that, to have built a platform that, at this time is able to serve, a benefit of connecting these communities digitally to provide them, a new way to socialize and compete. Talking with the MLSC team, they had said, it was really interesting to see, the different employees talking in the group chats about, their families and how they're dealing with work from home. That obviously wasn't, the intention when we added that in there, but it's great to see again, how that community has taken it and made it their own. In order for us to work through all of that, something that we decided kind of early on in this, that, we want to make sure that while we're helping others connect and keep their communities connected, that we're giving back to ours. So for the last month and through the end of this month, we've been donating 50% profit to the St. Louis Food Bank, just because the least that we could do, if somehow this is, benefiting our business in the middle of this, is to give back to our community that means so much to us. It's the least that we could do.
That's That's very admirable that you guys, even at your early stage, are still being so selfless and thinking about the greater good. When we think a little bigger, we think about the sports broadcasters, and I'll lump Twitch and YouTube into that. You know, how do you see the future panning out? I mean, right now we have NBA players playing video games against each other that I'm assuming that's not happening live. It's just pre-recorded and played for me on my television set when I tune to that cable channel. But for a lot of people, that probably is happening live on the platforms that capture it. So what do you see as the new normal coming out of this, and how really your platform enables that competition? We haven't even talked about the connectivity into YouTube or Twitch coming out of your platform, and maybe that's just a vision for the future where you're not there yet. But what do you think Mission Control can be doing to help the sports broadcasters or the streaming platforms of the world get content that people want to watch?
So I think the last month and a half has certainly, for as much as esports and video gaming has moved mainstream in the last couple of years, the last month and a half, the idea of someone sitting down and watching, I mean, my girlfriend's parents watched one of the first iNASCAR events. I don't even think they watch actual NASCAR, but they were like, this is something, I'm intrigued, I'm going to check it out. That's not something that they ever would have done if not for this experience. I think that what people are obviously clamoring to go back to having traditional sports, and really excited for the NBA playoffs and NHL playoffs and whatever form and whenever that comes back. But I do think that something that this time has shown, hopefully to broadcast networks and just people as a whole, there's a lot of really interesting content that can come out of having athletes, other celebrities playing video games against each other and streaming that. Or, I certainly see the possibility of seasons happening where, for instance, like the Madden tournament that ESPN has been doing. I mean, that can be some interesting, intriguing content that is in the football off season, that is keeping people tuning into ESPN, because ESPN is providing the off-season Madden league where there's a player from each of the leagues that's playing against each other, and we're going to find out who wins, and maybe whoever wins gives money to charity. I think that there's something really interesting there, and I think would get people to tune in. As how we're thinking about working or how Mission Control plays into that. We've toyed around with the idea for a long time, kind of what role or how do influencers play, in our platform. While our focus is definitely on further, downstream of, you and your son playing and his friends or your friends playing or your coworkers, you aren't necessarily going to be streaming on Twitch. That's something we do have to really think about. But how is there maybe a unique either story or content that's created because you get a whole bunch of influencers together in one league, and they're playing against each other, and we're collaborating with Twitch, and all that's being streamed, and that's content that's being created. Or maybe Mission Control is the one that is the platform that's helping these professional teams get all of their players connected to be competing against each other. I mean, we know that athletes, when they're not playing on the basketball court, they're playing 2K or COD in their hotel room. They're bringing that system on the road with them. How can Mission Control become that platform that, allows those athletes to track their stats and, communicate, or, their coaches be aware of kind of some of those things? Definitely stuff we're thinking about.
Well, I got to tell you, Byron, I'm really happy that I rang you up to ask you to come on Product AMA. This has been an inspiring chat today. I wish you guys, all the best of luck. It sounds like you're really busy, so even more grateful that you took the time to chat and kind of document, where you are, where you're going, where you've been. It's something that I hope you look back on in 12 or 18 months from now, and your business is just taking off like a rocket ship. That certainly sounds that way to me. Byron, again, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you soon, probably online or maybe in person when you're back in Toronto.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for the opportunity. Really enjoyed the conversation. Lee and Rhythm and everyone else that tuned in and checks this out later. Really appreciate the time and allowing me the platform to share our story and hopefully provide an insight or two.
Follow Product AMA on Twitter and send us your topic suggestions. We look forward to seeing you soon.